Hi everyone, this is Allan McKay. So I wanted to put together a video tutorial on how to jump into scripting. I thought this would be a fun one just to give you an idea about how to create your own preview tool. Now, this is a pretty simple script, but I thought it'd be interesting to learn to be able to customize your playblasts or previews to be able to read the file name, as well as read the username of the artist, as well as do a timestamp and store it on the network. So that way, every single time that you run a preview, it's going to generate a unique file every single time. Now, I've talked about this before about, I think it was during God of War, what I found to be very useful was being able to generate unique previews every single time, so that way I never overwrite any of my tools. The reason that was useful was because during production, what would happen is I would fill up a directory with all of these unique files. And while I'm waiting for a sim or while I'm waiting for a render, I'd be able to just play through them all and just for fun kind of see the progress, be able to see that the shots are getting better, better, better. And occasionally what would happen is I would start to plateau. In other words, I would start to see all of my previews seem to all look the same. And that meant that I'm kind of starting to slack off and I need to step up my game. In other words, I'm getting the same results. I need to get major shifts instead. On top of that, whenever I had clients come to me and say that they needed to see updated work, rather than taking a day to put together a presentation, and that might sound a bit crazy, but honestly, it would take about a day to go through and be able to generate all this stuff. Instead, I would have a whole folder of unique stuff that I could actually show and present to them. In addition to that, sometimes I would be looking at versions and I'm like, version 26 looks a lot better than version 33, and I'd be able to go back to that version very quickly because I'd be able to identify the exact file that I needed and be able to roll back to that very quickly because it was timestamped and it had the exact file name in there. So all of these things are very useful as an artist, both in production and by yourself. And I thought this would be a fun tool to make, but also kind of give you a chance to understand how to automate things and how it can save you a lot of time doing something very simple. So I hope you get a lot from this. This is one of many tutorials I'm going to be putting out over the coming days. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you can take a moment to leave a comment, let me know what other things you would like to automate, or if there's any specific training that you would like to see done. Like I said, I'm going to be an open book the next couple of days. I'm going to be putting out as much as I can leading up to Tuesday, which is the big day. I'm going to be putting out the Thanos training, which is an entire free crash course that I'm really excited about doing. So that being said, let's dive in. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into this. A couple of things I'm just going to quickly mention is that with scripting, you don't need to know math, you don't need to be smart. Every artist should learn some basic stuff to automate things that you're doing. A couple of really quick things are, if you go to scripting, you have the listener and the editor. The editor is this guy here, the listener is this here. If you go macro enable, it means that everything that you do in here, almost everything, is going to echo back what it's doing, depending on like how verbose it is. So it's going to spit back, like when I select the cylinder, it says select cylinder. If I hold Control mouse wheel, I can zoom in a little bit, make that a bit bigger, but I can select Tyflow cylinder, whatever. It's going to, clear the selection when I deselect it. So you can start to get familiar with like what any program like Maya, MaxScript, whatever is thinking under the hood. So that can be kind of handy at times. Now, I just have like a pretty basic scene of some like electricity, like shifting over this object with Tyflow. And what I want to do is I want to generate a preview of that. So with scripting, what I've got here, I put this into like a comment block. So it means like / star / it means that anything in here, it's green, meaning it's a comment. It means it ignores everything inside of these, opposed to being black, which means that it's part of the script. So I wrote down like, these are the steps I would want to do. Like there's nothing too complicated about this. Like I quit school when I was 13, like second week of grade 9. And I barely went to school before that anyway. So if I can do this stuff, you can as well. Key thing is I just break, like anything I do, whether it's scripting, whether it's effects, I just write down like what my steps are. I want to create a preview. So I got to figure out that. Then I need to base the file name of the preview based on the name of the file, the max file. I also want to choose what directory it's stored in. I also want to add in as a suffix, like as at the end of the file, I want to add in the timestamp and the username, a couple other things in there as well. So as I mentioned before, like God of War is where I started doing this, and it was very impactful in what I was doing because it meant that I had like a big directory of all my stuff, and I could go through and play everything. And occasionally you might see that you're working on a shot and you're like, man, version 26 looks way better than version 33. What if I rolled back to that? But then you're like, well, how do I find that again? And so my file naming here is a version and take system. So in other words, I'll version up and I'll do artist takes in between. So it means that whenever I submit a version for review, then I'd switch to the next version and I'd reset the takes. So, you know, it doesn't matter too much, but basically, if I were to find my file again, having the timestamp and everything in there, it would allow me to very easily be able to find that file. You know, and you can automate stuff even more. Like if I were to submit anything for render, I could clone that file to the network somewhere safe. I always say that disk space is a lot cheaper than artist hours are, so I don't mind wasting disk space if it's going to save me 10 minutes, an hour, a day, a week. So the other thing I want to mention is that the way that I find everything out, if I don't know something with scripting, I'll just type it in, like MaxScript, and then I don't know, yeah, how to get a file name. And then I can just go in and like you've already got all the stuff in here. So I could just open up a few tabs and just see what I find. But in general, you know, you'll find that there's really good information out there. So if I scroll through here, I type in file name again because I'm lazy, but you'll see like, you know, different commands popping up. But if I want to get, let's say, even just searching here, max file name, and yeah, just in general, if you click through a few of these, you'll find like what that answer would be. So just in general, like it doesn't take too much work to kind of look around and be able to find the answers to your questions. So in other words, like, you know, open up 3 tabs or 4 tabs. Right here it says an example, you know, how to get your file name, how to get your file path. Max file name is the command, max file path is the directory. So in other words, I could type in max file name, whoops, and then I execute that. It's going to give me back the file name, decimation 0126 affects electricity V01 T01. So max file path, right now it's like C drive temp tyflow, but if this was on the network, then we could easily get that information. So I'm going to freeball for a second, just explain this. You don't have to worry about keeping up. I'm just more kind of showing the potential here. But let's say that I did filter, well, you know, let's say max file name. Initially, when I execute that, so tools, evaluate line selection, or evaluate the entire script, or I can just hit enter on the right numeric keypad enter key, or shift enter on the main key enter key, that will execute it, right? So just to point that out, like if I want to execute just this one line, shift enter or enter on the right numeric key, that'll execute it. So if I run max file name, it's going to tell me decimation blah blah blah. That's the name of the file name there. Now if I wanted to, I could say filter string, and again, if I go into Google, type in filter string MaxScript, it'll explain what this does. But what this does is it allows me to, like, if I look at the file name, I've intentionally put these underscores throughout the file name. And this is with everything, it's a very strict file naming convention because that way I can pull information from this file very easily. Project is decimation, sequence 001, shot 026, the discipline, effects department. The pass name is electricity. And then we're version 1, take01.max. Okay, so let's just say that this was to be stored on the network. Well, I might say let's just say network path equals, and then I'll just put O drive PRJ like that. And then the next thing I might want to do is find the actual name of the project. So I could pull that from the file name, so decimation. So let's say I want to get electricity, it's the 5th one there. If I did filter string, max file name, and then I broke it up with those underscores, what happens is it puts it into this bucket, this kind of group here. We can see decimation O on 26 because it's breaking it up based on those underscores that I defined here. So this breaks it up into kind of like a list of items. So if I were to put this in brackets so it just considers this one big block, like one chunk, then I could say item 5. The 5th item is electricity. So if I hit enter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, electricity is being pulled. So if I wanted to get the project, which is the first item, it's 1. And that gives me decimation because decimation is right there. So max file name returns the entire file name. I'm using this filter string based on the underscore. I'm trying to filter out that max file name based on the underscore into a list. And then I'm trying to access the first item, which is decimation. So the brackets put this as one item, so it just considers it one big chunk to execute. And then outside of there, it then says, well, I want to get the first item, so they're in square brackets because it's an array, it's a group or a list. So that's the simplest way that I can pull decimation. If this was called Smurfs or Transformers, it would spit back the name of the project every time. So then I could say prj name equals that. By putting this variable, prj name equals, I'm defining this variable. So in other words, now whenever I type in prj name, it's going to tell me the name of the project. Network path, if I executed that, I typed in network path. If I could spell network path, it's going to tell me that. So by doing the two of these, I could say network path plus prj name, and it's going to combine the two to give me the directory. So what if from there, pblast, let's call it iCandy dir equals, and then we'll just say io slash, actually backslash io slash outgoing slash pblasts backslash. So I got to put an @ there as well, so that way it just reads the directory. Long story, basically it reads as forward slashes. If you put a backslash there, we got to put an @ You know, again, the syntax is what this takes time to learn, but it's pretty easy to pick up. But by getting this, I can then add that on top. So iCandy dir, and now we got ODrive project decimation and then the playbus directory. So if, for instance, my max file name was something like different, like a different project, it would replace decimation with whatever the project is based on the file name. That would be the easiest way to be able to quickly, dynamically store this in the project directory where you want to work. Now, we're not going to use any of that, but it's handy to know, you know, how easy it is. It mightn't at first make sense, but after a while it will. For now, I'm going to comment this stuff out. Hit tab to indent that. But I just want to kind of point that out. So in terms of what we're doing, I can actually, let's say that I go back into Google. There's a command called getdir, and then we can see getdir MaxScript. Yes, please. And then we see external file commands. I can scroll down to getdir. It says get directories, getdir. Getdir allows me to get a directory path, but I can actually pull in actual system paths as well. So I need to do a bit of jumping around to find that, but in general, yeah, actually here, max system directory. So if I were to use the getdir command, I could actually then pull the animation directory, auto backup directory, whatever. So one of these is preview, so hash preview, and this is the directory it would pull, or something similar to that. Okay, so the whole point is, like I say, getdir hashtag preview, and it's going to tell me that's the directory where all my previews get stored. So for us, because I'm assuming maybe you're not on a network in a project folder, let's just work with our standard max directory. And what I want to do is I could say, let's just call this like pb for playblast dir equals. So we're setting this as a variable where now, make sure you execute that, so hit enter, but then if I type pb dir, it's going to give me that directory. So that's the easiest way to be able to pull the directory to where to store my preview. And then from there I can say pbfn, so in other words, playblast file name. And this is where we could do that filter string and blah, blah, blah that we did before to be able to create the file name. Like, how do we want to save it? Because back in the day, Max would always save out underscore scene.avi. And it was frustrating because you'd go in and have to like copy or rename it every single time. And the whole point is I want these to store uniquely every single time, never overwrite anything, but put a new thing in every single time. So pbfn, playblast file name. And all I want to do is I want to say, let's see, let's pull the file name, I guess. So we can say max file name. Problem with that is that right now it's returning the .max and everything as well. So what we could do is we could say instead filter string max file name and then the full stop here, right? So by doing that, this is where making sure that you put it in the right places. So yeah, I'm trying to execute this as one big block, and that's going to break it up into the whole thing minus the .max. So that's the easiest way to remove the .max, because what I did is do filter string max file name, and then doing the dot here. It's going to break it up into chunk 1, chunk 2, because it's breaking up based on where that dot was. So then I can say item 1, exactly like what we did before with the underscores. Instead, we're doing it with the dot. So by doing that, now we're just getting the first chunk of the name before the .max. So that's the easiest way to pull that up. Now, let's say I wanted to elaborate on that. Again, just going through the documentation, you can pull in so much stuff, but one of those is, was it sysinfo? And that's going to bring up all of this information I can pull out about my computer. And one of these is computer name and then username. So if I were to say sysinfo.username, my username is not very original, Allan. But what if I said plus sysinfo.username? Now we execute this, is putting Allan there. And the formatting's wrong, but I like the idea that I could even tell like who the artist was that generated this. So if I'm looking through a previews and I'm like, oh, this is cool, who made it, I can quickly find that out. Right now it's like Takeo1 and then Allan. So I need to say plus underscore plus. So we're adding the max file name plus doing an underscore, and then we're adding the username. And now sorry, I had that selected. Now I hit that. It's giving me a longer name. Okay, so this is how we can start to build out this file name. So version 1, Takeo1, so I know the file it came from, Allan. And then from there, what if we wanted to set up some dates and things like that? I'm going to keep this really simple. The way that I'm going to do this, for anyone who's like more seasoned at scripting, you're going to be like, wow, like what the hell are you doing, Allan? Like there's ways to do this in like 3 lines that are really simple. But I want to do this where it just makes sense for someone who's never scripted before. So you could do like local time and then pull that, pull that in and then change the formatting to underscores, going through a loop or doing a substring. Plenty of ways to do it. I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to say datetime. Well, I'm going to do a .NET class. Sorry, so .NET class system.datetime. Is that right? Sorry, I can't spell. Helps if you learn to spell when you're doing this stuff. So .NET class system datetime. That allows me to then pull in like day, I think is the syntax. Might have to do it a bit differently, but the main thing is that if I were to say date time equals this. Oh, and then I do a .now. That's because it needs to know how to pull that in. So I'm getting ahead of myself here, but all I wanted to do was that. Okay, so, sorry, getting ahead of myself, but date time, I'm just making this as a variable so I can call it whenever I want, but it saves me having to type this in every single time. But all I'm just saying is .NET class is what it's just calling this command, and the command is going to get the date and time, and then that's the subcall. So that just gives me something to work with. So date time, now I can just type that in, but now I can actually call datetime.day. Sorry, as string, there we go. Otherwise it thinks it's a command it's spitting out and doesn't know what that command is. So all I'm doing is I'm getting a simple command like this that allows me to pull information very quickly. So date time as string, and all I do is, like, let's say month, and that's going to tell me the month. So this is a different way. It's less efficient, but I'm thinking for anyone who's like, I don't want to intimidate people too much, this might be like a sensical way of doing it. So if I were to pull in the year, I would just say date time dot year as string. So as text is what a string is. And when I run that, it's going to give me 2019. So that's why. I'm going to copy this a bunch of times. And I'm going to say month, day, and then hour, and then minute. So the whole idea would be that I would then change this to month, day, hour, minute. So when I run this, it's going to give me all the information I need. So from there, I could easily put this together the same way we did down here. I could just, because it's all text, right? I could say y plus underscore plus m plus underscore plus d. So year, month, day, and it's going to give me this formatting. So like I said, there are ways to do this way easier than how I'm currently doing it, but I'm trying to do it where it makes sense if you're not familiar with scripting. All we're doing is we're setting this variable y equals calling the year command as text, month, call the month, the date, and then we're piecing it back together. So I could say plus hour plus minute, and if I did this, we don't have the underscores, so it's going to look weird. So that's where we need to go back in and say underscore plus, and then underscore plus, and now we get that. Okay, so that is 2019, June 27, and it's 12:02, now it's 12:03 p.m. And I could simply put this as pb underscore timestamp equals. So I'm saying pb, playblast timestamp, equals this. So whenever I call it pb timestamp, it's going to give me a timestamp. And now I could go and put underscore plus pb timestamp. And the cool thing is, this is becoming a bit more ridiculous, but I can look at this whenever I want, and I can be like, all right, Allan was the one who made the playblast, and it was on this day at this time, okay? And unless I'm doing more than one playblast per minute, the file name is always going to be unique. So that's just really important to set up the file name. So this mightn't seem like fun. I actually like messing with strings. It's kind of fun the more you get into it, but this is based on this is all dynamic. So if I were to log into someone else, it's going to be using a different username. Any time of the day, it's going to be using a different time. Any project is going to be using a different project. Any shot, any different pass name. All of this is dynamic, and it's pulling it all automatically. So whenever I want, I can just run this, and it's going to tell me it's now 12:05. Okay, so all of that is really important with what we're doing. So that was one big chunk, was, you know, get the base name of the preview in the max file and also the directory. So we've done all of these already. We got the base name of the file, which is decimation blah blah electricity. We're controlling the directory. We could either put it on the network, but in this case, we're just getting the system directory previews, and then we're generating the unique file name based on timestamp, date, user, name of the artist, blah blah blah. So we've already done all of these. Now we just need to actually build the preview, because now we know how to save it out. That part's done. So there's plenty of ways to go about doing this, but in general, I'm going to keep this pretty straightforward. I won't get into the commands too much, but I'll more talk about what they're doing. But again, just going and using the MaxScript documentation, you can say, how do I make a preview? How do I do this? it'll tell you that information, and from there you say, well, what does this command do? And you can look that up, and it'll tell you more information about every single command that you work with. So in this case, I mean, the way that we work is gw.getViewportDib. As you can see, it turns blue because that's an actual command. So if it's black, it means that it's not a command. Like, if I were to type in system, okay, system's a bad one, directory. I'm trying to think of something, class. Come on. Man, well, anyway, I'll just, maybe it's only in here, system. Yeah, okay, just not in the listener. So if I type in something that exists, like system exists, it turns blue. Or class of, it's gonna, you know, so something that exists turns blue. My class doesn't exist. So you know that this is a command. If it's turned blue, it means that it's an internal command. So you can't call something that already exists. But it also means that you know that it's a command. And what that would do is it would run this program essentially that will capture the viewport. And what I want to do is actually want to open that up and store all this into a file. Okay, so the way that we'll do this is probably the simplest way of all would be, it's kind of like file open. We'll just do bitmap, and we're going to create a bitmap, and we'll give it a resolution. So we'll just say 960 by 540 is a good like 1K res, and then file name, we're just going to call the PBFN, but we'll put in this in brackets. We'll say PBFN plus .avi, and what that means is going to give us this as the final AVI file, but we also need the directory as well. So let's do this. We'll say playblast file equals pbdir plus pbfn plus .avi, and that's going to give us the directory, and then we need to have a backslash. So at, and then quotes backslash, because backslash is a weird, it needs an at. Long story, but traditionally you do forward slashes, but yeah, this is better. Otherwise you do double backslashes, but this is relatively new, like the last 10 years you can do an at instead. It just makes it easier because it's a true path. But anyway, so by executing that, it's going to give us the directory, and then the backslash, so there's the directory, there's the backslash. There's the long file name. It's now still 1205 because I didn't execute this. If I executed the whole entire thing, we'll now see that it's 1209, and then it's a .avi. So that's how we're able to generate this long file name, and then from there I just say play blast file, and that's where it's going to store it. So it's going to create this AVI file, this guy here, that's unique, and it tells me everything I know to be able to find the original file. It tells me who did it as well, and it's going to store it in that directory. So we're opening up this file. By executing this is actually going to create that file, and from there we then would want to store information in it. So it's the same way we could open a text file and store information, then we got to close it afterwards. So the best way to do is to say playblast equals, okay, so I know we've got very similar names. Usually I wouldn't have them so similar because playblast file can get confusing, but playblast is the variable that is going to open this up, so we can call it again later to close it. Otherwise you can't touch that file until you close Max. It's really annoying. So playblast file equals bitmap, there's the resolution, and then the file it's going to create. And then from there, we would go in and we would capture the viewport, and we would store it into the bitmap. Okay, so the way we would do that is we would do a loop. So let's say T for time equals animation range. We see it turn red because it's a command. Animation range.start is going to call the very first frame because we're 0 to 45 frames. So animation range.start, animation, let's say to animation range.end do. So animation range.end is the last frame, which is 45. So I can call the first frame, the last frame, and all I'm doing is I'm going to say T is going to cycle through 1, 2, 3 all the way to 45, and each time T is going to change in value. So then I can say slider time equals T, and if T was set up, so if T equaled 10, then when I did slider time equals T, it's going to jump to frame 10. If it equals 11, and you get the idea. So the whole point is that it will cycle through. It would go forward 1 frame, and then store the information. So let's just say that I say cap frame equals gw.get viewport dib like this, and that's going to capture the viewport. And then from there, I could do copy cap frame, and then play blast. So we're going to store it inside of that bitmap, and then save play blast. And then we'll go forward 1 frame, and then it'll loop through and do it again. Okay? So finally, we want to say close play blast. Really important, like I said before, if you open a file and then you never close it, then, and that's why you need to be able to call it back very easily, then what ends up happening is Max will keep it open. You'll never be able to delete it or anything until you close Max, because it's technically, feeding into it the whole time. So that's pretty much our script. So finally, let's just go slider time equals animation range.start. So once the preview goes through the entire way, let's jump back to the first frame again. A train or a bus in the background. So, I mean, that's the general idea. And I know I'm kind of, usually I'm a bit more patient going through this, but I'm going to run to a meeting in a minute. I wanted to do this really quick, but all we're doing, we got the date time stuff here. So this whole chunk is just generating this block telling us it's now the 12:14 p.m. Okay. And then we're getting the playbus directory. We're defining this long ass file name, and then we're doing the entire directory and file name all together. And then from there, we're opening up this bitmap where we're going to write to this file, and then we're capturing the frame each time. So we're capturing it, and then we're copying it into this file, and then we're saving that, and then we're jumping to the next frame, and then we're doing it again over and over and over. And then once it's done, we close it down. So once it's gone through all the frames in the sequence, it jumps out of this loop, and that's when it's going to close the file so it's saved, and then it goes back to the first frame again. So if I were to run this here, it's going to run through now, it's going to write everything out. And you can see that it's writing it all out. Well, actually that's Tyflow speaking, but you can see that like we're cycling through all the frames. We can see it down here, but and that way it's all done. So the only thing is that how do we know it worked, right? We can go and load it all up, but it's probably easier just to say, well, here's the file, right? So why don't I just say shell launch? Shell launch allows you to load an external program. In this case, we're just going to call the file because it's associated with media player or whatever. So I'm just going to say that. And shell launch is always going to ask for like what other flags or inputs do you want. Let's say that you were loading up nuke and you wanted it to be associated with a file, you would put the file in there. But in this case, we're calling the file directly, so I'm just going to put empty quotes, meaning that there's nothing else there. Okay, so now when I run that, it's going to load up my file, right? So that is our entire script. You just say message box, preview complete, Let's just execute that. So in other words, it's running the preview. Once it's finished, it's actually going to load the preview up so we can check it out. Preview complete. And in the background, there we go. So there it is. It just loaded it up behind Max, not in front of it. But there's our preview and it's all working correctly. So that's the general idea. Like, I know it's a bit alien at first, but if you break this down, it's really straightforward. If you break it down, you get the idea of like what it's doing. Google what this is. Same thing with this, like get dir, like preview that, like Google it. I mean, you can get a directory and then you can say get files in that directory, whatever you want to do. But we're just combining, like all of this is just strings to create the final file output. And then from there, we're just defining to make a file, and we're going to loop through and capture the viewport a dozen times and save it all out. And then finally, we're just loading that file up. That's the 3 things we're doing. So these are the steps that I wrote down. That's exactly what we're doing here. So it's really straightforward, but it means that whenever we load up anything now, any project that we're working on, we can make this into a button. You could even select all and drag it out into your toolbar here, and it'll actually create a button. I don't want to do it, but then I hit a button whenever I want. It's going to automatically run a preview for me, and then it's going to store it with a unique file name that directly is based on there we can see the file name, or we can see it up here, like it's directly based on our scene. So I can always track down that Allan made this on the 27th of June 2019 at 12:17 p.m. And this is the file name. So we can always go back and find that exact file name. Very straightforward, and we don't need the message box. I just want to point out, like, you can put in whatever you want. But that's the general idea. This would allow you to just, whenever you run it, it'll create a unique, brand new file to work with, and from there you can, be able to store as many as you want. So I tend to do this a lot. Usually I have, usually I have like a lot of, like each project will store all the unique files based on that project, and they'll all be in the same directory. And it means if a client says we need to see updates, I can just go through there and look for some cool stuff and send it to them, rather than taking a day off to put together a presentation. But more importantly, I can look through my stuff and just kind of get an idea, like, what looks good, what looks bad, to get a better idea of, like, is my shot getting better or worse? What else can I do? It's great for making ofs because, again, I've just got so much material I can work with. So like random play blasts that I can bring up very easily, just to kind of get an idea of how something's looking or whatever. So that's the general idea. It just allows me to be able to generate previews really quickly, and from here you can customize it more. Like I said, we've already listed how to store it on the per project, so that way every single project has all the play blasts stored there. There's so many things you can customize it from here with. You could also research how to actually imprint stuff in the viewport. So if you wanted to store information in the viewport as well, whatever you wanted to do, there's so much power in this. And this is the tip of the iceberg, but it's hopefully planting a seed about, like, cool, now I know how to do this. How do I customize my viewport while this is going on to be clay, to be high quality, to be IPR, whatever it might be, and kind of go from there. So I hope this helped. And if anything, I'm more curious what you do with this. Since it's pretty straightforward, there's an actual exercise in the Max documentation, which is what this is based on, but then this is my take on it. Okay, so I hope that helped. And this is, again, like something that we do a lot of this in the mentorship, but it's more like, let's say I render something and then I hit a button, it automatically loads up Nuke and it composites my shot, it updates. Let's say if I wanted to update a Nuke script with all the latest renders, I can hit a button in Max and it will actually update it all, and then generate a QuickTime for me, put it in the client out directory, whatever. I've had scripts where I was working on the equalizer and I hit a button, it would contact the studio in Boston and it'll pull all the files across to LA and synchronize them all, including changing the file naming conventions, because the studio used different file naming conventions than what we used. It would switch them all over and set it all up on my network. It would bring in the latest LiDAR, the latest camera, the latest plates, everything, set it all up for me. And when I'm ready to send it back to them for rendering, I hit a button and it publishes it back in their file naming. It brings up a DOS window, renames everything. You can do so much with it, and it just means that Some of that stuff would take me hours to do manually, whereas now it's just a button. And it just frees up my time to be an artist rather than being like a peon, just kind of doing layman stuff all the time. My time spent being an artist instead. Okay, I hope you got a lot from this. I know I went through it pretty quickly, but all the information is there and it's a chance for you to start to experiment. And what else would you like to do with it? Go use the documentation, use Google. Honestly, I'm living in Google and in the docs whenever I'm doing something new because it's impossible to memorize all of the stuff. But at the same time, once you get into a habit, you can start to pull code from previous scripts you've written very easily and bit by bit be able to patch together whatever you need and then grow from there. So this is the tip of the iceberg, but I want you as an artist to start to think about how you could automate many of the tasks that you typically do. So leave a comment and let me know what you think you would love to try to automate, and more importantly, what other video tutorials you would like to see. Because I want to post as many of these leading up to Tuesday. We're going to be putting out the Thanos training, which I'm so excited about. I've spent weeks on this and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so thanks again. Make sure to subscribe to the channel as well so you don't miss out on all the upcoming videos as well. All right, rock on.